guidance of this subcommittee.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the gentleman from the great state of Maryland, Mr. Raskin, the ranking member.
And thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We've got decades of excellent government, law enforcement experience represented at the table. Unfortunately, I've only got 5 minutes, so I want to go very quickly. I want to ask a few yes or no questions, and I'll start with you, Mr. Blue, and go down. In your time as a prosecutor, have you been aware of any case where prosecutors have been fired or otherwise disciplined in office for having worked on a particular case that they were assigned to before January 6th?
Not until the last month.
Mr. Fahey, Mr. Breen, you were not a prosecutor, as I understand. Okay, Mr. Fahey, in your years of government law enforcement, were you aware of any prosecutors who ever were disciplined or demoted or fired because they'd worked on a particular case before January 6th?
For being assigned to a case or beyond that? I know of people that may have been disciplined by their work on a case, but by me.
I'm not talking about misconduct on a case.
But just by being assigned.
Just by virtue of being on a team.
I don't know of any.
Okay, Mr. Swecker, did you ever encounter that in your many years on the FBI?
Not based on mere assignment of a case. I will note that, at the end of administration, U.S. attorneys routinely submit their resignations and usually are fired.
Right, but in terms of line prosecutors, civil service lawyers, you're not, or FBI agents rather, you're not aware of any. And okay, let me continue with you for a sec. Have you heard of a case where participation as an FBI agent in a particular case is grounds for dismissal or demotion, just for having worked on a particular case?
No, absent misconduct.
Okay. Mr. Blue, back to you. So a number of attorneys, around 24, I think, have been sacked just because they worked on a particular case, even if they are civil service people, which means you can't be fired for political reasons. You can only be fired for poor performance or misconduct. But I think all of the dozen attorneys who worked for Jack Smith, and a dozen attorneys were fired, I think, on the very first day because they had worked on the January 6th prosecution. Will you describe what you think the lawfulness of that is, and then also what effect that will have on morale and cohesion within the ranks of lawyers who work at the Department of Justice?
It certainly seems unlawful in that these people were being fired not because of misconduct, but because of simply the cases that they were working on, essentially viewpoint discrimination. The effect is profound. These attorneys weren't just working on January 6 cases. They were working on other cases within the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office. So,
and it's not viewpoint discrimination based on any of the viewpoints they had. We have no idea what their viewpoints were. It was viewpoints based on the people who've come into the office who think that somehow it's a badge of stigma or shame to have worked on a particular case.
Precisely.
There were 6,000 FBI agents who worked on January 6th, which was the most massive, violent mob attack on the United States Congress and the peaceful transfer of power and the vice president in American history. What do you think about the idea that somehow there's an attempt to demonize and vilify people for having done their jobs in working on it?
Yeah, I think if they are demonized, if they're fired, it's going to be devastating for the FBI because these are folks that are working on counterterrorism, counterespionage, and other cases.
Yeah. So, Mr. Fayed, one other question for you. Do you think that the idea of sacking all of these lawyers simply because of having worked on a particular case will promote public safety in the District of Columbia or undermine public safety in the District of Columbia?
If people are being fired just for because I know the hypothetical, I don't know why individuals were fired and if there's conduct or if things are interrelated. I think overall the morale is going to be far higher because morale is rock bottom at DOJ, rock bottom at the FBI under the prior administration.
In the last 4 weeks, I agree with you on that.
No. During the prior administration, if you bring in some law enforcement agents,
we'll have a separate hearing on that. We'll get back to you on that one. Mr. Blue,
you've got to talk to them because they.
All right, we'll have you back. I promise. I would love nothing more.
Yeah.
Mr. Blue, let me come back to you. I've heard. I was there January 6th, so I know that was something that really happened. Officer Brian Sicknick really died from strokes that he had based on the violence visited on him, being sprayed in the face with noxious chemicals. He's buried at Arlington National Cemetery, and I'll take anyone with the Sicknick family over there to see him. This is not some kind of a mirage. This really happened. 140 of our officers were smashed in the face with Confederate battle flags, Trump flags, broken furniture, steel pipes, you name it. There were heart attacks, traumatic brain injury. I've got constituents who've never recovered from the wounds that took place there. Sergeant Cannell had to leave the... But when we talk about it, then I hear about the prosecution and vilification of parents, of mothers and fathers. And hey, I'm a father. My kids went to public school. That doesn't sound very good to me. So I try to get to the bottom of this because I've been hearing about it for 5 years now. And I ask myself, what are they talking about? So I get the memo, which was from Attorney General Merrick Garland. And it begins, I don't have time to read the whole thing. There's been a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence against school administrators, teachers, board members, and staff. The word mother or father don't appear. The word parent doesn't appear here. There's all of this propaganda about some prosecution of parents is based on absolutely nothing. This is just made up out of thin air. So I will submit this for the record. The memo, though, all of this goes back to Mr. Chairman. Thanks so much.
Without objection. The chair recognizes, well, I'll see who I'm recognizing. The chair recognizes Mr. Schmidt from the great state of Kansas. See, I remembered that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll be on the exam at the end. Thank you very much.